Welcome, country living friends. In this video, I'm going to go over our first year of attempting to depend completely on our solar power system for all of our electrical needs. There will be a boring spreadsheet at the end. Now I'm going to put the information on the screen once I collect it from my husband, letting you know the size of our solar system and our battery bank. Before we get into the numbers, I thought it would be good to summarize our family's electrical usage and our habits in case you want to compare them to your own. There are 4 of us living in our home full time. Our home is 2,100 square feet. It was built in 2013 and it's a Cape Cod style house. We run everything on electricity in our home. There's no gas, no propane. And I thought of 4 of the major appliances that are energy hogs, and I wanted to describe how we use them. That way you can compare it to your usage of energy. We have 2 central air conditioning systems, one for each floor of our house, and we keep the AC between 74 and 76 degrees Fahrenheit during the warmer seasons, which for us run May through September. And in the winter, the colder seasons, we don't use the HVAC system. Instead, we have a wood cook stove, and we use mostly the trees from our property. We get a few from friends and neighbors, but we use those trees to heat our home, as well as doing probably 10 to 20% of the cooking and baking during that time frame as well. And for us, that's about mid-October to mid-April. We do collect more sun during the months that the air conditioning is running, so we have no problem running that. And there's less sun in the winter months, but we aren't using the HVAC system then because of the wood stove. We haven't yet done a test to see how long the batteries would last if we did run the heat during the winter from the HVAC system. But we can still switch back to the grid anytime we want to and use the grid power. So when we do go out of town in the winter, and it's going to be a long while and the temperatures are going to get really low, we just leave the house on grid power so the heat can run and we don't have to worry about what might happen while we're gone. A few months before we started using solar power, we had switched our traditional water heater over to a heat pump water heater, and that alone had made about a $50 reduction in our electric bill. So we recommend heat pump hot water heaters to anyone who's interested, especially if you're switching to solar. They use less energy to heat and maintain the water temperature that you choose to set. Number 3 would be your cooking range, and we have an electric range for all of our cooking and baking needs. And I do prepare all of our meals from scratch here, so I'm cooking a lot. And when possible in the winter, I do also use the wood cook stove. And last but not least would be the electric clothes dryer. Now, prior to being on solar power, I line dried probably 60 to 80% of our clothing, either outside on good weather days or inside during wood stove season. Now that we have solar, I still line dry inside for the wood stove season, mostly because we appreciate the moisture that it adds to the air. However, I've been line drying outside a little less because, well, we usually have an excess of power while the sun is shining, so why not just toss the wet clothes in the dryer? The fact that I'm home all day is a benefit because I can do the majority of our energy use during the day while the sun shines. Now, our overnight battery usage in the winter would mainly be heating our metal shop with a Mr. Cool, which is set to about 42 degrees. Other than the regular fridges, freezers, and ghost electronic uses, in the summer, our overnight battery usage would be mostly eaten up with air conditioning. I do heat my greenhouse with a small space heater at night during the early spring to keep the peppers and tomatoes happy. And all spring and summer, our girls have a chicken heat lamp, or 2 or 3, going because they hatch and sell chicks. And also last year, we added an above ground pool. So in the summertime, that is having a lot of energy pull using the pool pump, but that happens during the day when there's sun. So we have plenty of power in the summer. Other than watching to see what our battery percentages are at, the biggest changes I think that I've made since switching from full-time grid electricity to full-time solar electricity is that I do remind everyone to shower during the sunlight hours when possible. And I will adjust our laundry days. If I look ahead in the forecast and see 2 or 3 or 4 days of consistent clouds, but you might be surprised at how much charge you can still get on a cloudy day. And lastly, even though there is plenty of sunshine, plenty of power in the summer, I mean, we're wasting a lot of power because we're not using what we could use. But even though there's plenty, our inverter will only let us use so much power at one time. So I did learn last summer that approximately 4 appliances are the most I can use at once. So our well pump is one appliance that pulls heavy. Our water heater pulls heavy. And those two things I don't keep track of when they're running because I can't see them. So I keep in mind that all the time the well and the water pump, or the well and the heat pump, could be running. So that's 2. Then you have the oven and the dryer and the air conditioning as far as summertime goes. So I have to keep in mind that I can only run 4 of those 5 appliances at one time. So if I'm cooking, I won't run the dryer at the same time. Or if for some reason I absolutely have to run the dryer and the oven and stove, then I'll just turn the air conditioning off for however long it is. I'm doing that, usually half an hour. But that is the biggest change that I've had to keep track of when it comes to running the house, being on solar. Okay, is that enough detail to have a decent idea of how we use electricity on a normal day? All right, so we are ready to look at the numbers from 2023, which was our first year of trying to be 100% solar run in our home. So looking back in 2022, we were still 100% on the grid. At that time, we had 5 people living at home. Our oldest has since moved out, but then we were using about 26,000 kilowatts per year. And our average monthly cost was $276 per month. And I do average because in the summer we use more power because of the air conditioning, and in the winter we use less power because of the wood stove. Now, in early 2022, my husband started building our solar system, and April 6th was the first day that we turned the solar power on and ran the lights and just some small appliances in our house. So throughout 2022, we were slowly enlarging the system, slowly getting more panels, slowly getting more batteries as we had the cash saved up to do it. So 2022 was half and half. It was probably still more grid than solar. Obviously, if you look at our kilowatt usage for the year, we still had 15,352 kilowatts from the grid electrical power. And our average monthly bill, if you average the whole year out, dropped to $185 a month. So it was when we got a few more batteries at the end of the year, and we kind of ran December a lot of the way on solar power, we decided, let's just try to run the whole house and see how long we can do it. We'll just let it go and run the batteries out. If it's going to be cloudy for a few days, let's just see how long we can go without electric power from the grid. Keeping track of our grid usage was not hard. The electric company does it for us. So I could just look back over my bills and see how much power we used from the grid each month, what our cost was from them. But for keeping track of the solar power, I had 3 different things I would track each day, whether we were 100% solar, whether we were 100% on the grid, or if it was kind of a half and half day or a partial day. And that could be anywhere from 1 to 99%. It would vary each day. The reasons it might vary like that during the day is, say we'd had 2 or 3 or 4 days of clouds and our battery bank was getting pretty low. We could switch our power in the house so that bigger loads like the air conditioning, the stove, the dryer, those items would run on the electrical grid, and everything else in the house could still run on solar, just to drag our battery power out a little bit longer until the sun came back. The days that we were 0% solar and 100% grid were generally just because my husband turned the solar off to the house so that he could switch an inverter out or upgrade something, or a lot of times he would test other inverters and other solar projects and review them. So during those days, the house would be completely on the grid so that he could be testing all their solar stuff in the shop. So, for example, January on the grid, we used 132 kilowatts, and our total cost from the electric company was $46.75. So $26 to $30, somewhere in there per month, is the minimum that anyone pays to keep their grid panel connected to the electric company. So unless you call the electric company and say, turn my power off, then you're still going to pay between $26 and $30, at least at our electric company, just to be connected to the electrical grid. During January, we had 20 days out of the month that were 100% solar power for the house and the property, the shop, everything. 3 of the days during the month were 0% solar power usage. So that might have been, again, because we had clouds for too long, or my husband was doing some work on the inverters in the shop. So that's 23 days of one or the other. There's 31 days in January, so there would have been 8 days that were in between, somewhere between 1 and 99% solar usage. So since March has 31 days, you can see 28 of those days was 100% solar power. 0 days were 100% grid power. That means 3 of the days during March had some little portion of electric grid power, and that's why we got to the 23 kilowatts. Now looking down further, October is highlighted in blue because that was the month last year that we used the most electric grid power. We had 307 kilowatts of use, $66.87 was our bill. 16 days of the month of October were 100% solar power usage. 5 days were 100% grid power usage. So that's 21 days altogether. That means there was 10 days left over in October that were anywhere from 1 to 99% solar. So there's no easy way for me to keep track of that. And I can know 100 and I can know 0. But that's what the year ended with for us. So our total kilowatt usage for the whole year of 2023, which came from the electrical grid system, was 1,936 kilowatts. Our total electric bill that we paid to the electric company was $601.90. So considering, let's just say it was an even $30 a month minimum just to have the grid connected to our house, that would have been $360 a year, would have been the least we could have paid without calling the electric company and saying, turn our power off. That means $241 is what we paid for the grid that we actually used, that we could have saved if we'd been completely 0% electric power throughout the year. Out of the 365 days in the year, 248 of them were 100% solar power for us. 23 of the days were 100% electric on the grid. And then that leaves 94 days of the year that we were somewhere between 1 and 99% on our solar power that we generated. So if you wanted to better compare all 3 years, our total grid, when we were completely on the electrical grid, our bill was around $3,300 a year, and last year it was down to $600 for the year, which if you do that per month, at the high end it was $276 per month, and last year we had it down to $50 per month. And our average kilowatt usage when we were completely on the electrical grid was about $2,200 per month, and last year our average was $161 per month. I would say that we could get our power all the way down to $360 a month. We could stay 100% solar all year long. Our system is that size now. We've added some more batteries as of March 2024. But I do know my husband's going to keep experimenting and testing other inverters, so we will have some days here and there that we have to use the electric power from the grid. So how important is the cost of electricity in our decision about having solar power? For us, our primary reason was not the cost of electricity. Electricity is, from what I hear, fairly inexpensive here in Virginia compared to other states. But what we do have a problem with, at least on our specific co-op electric company, is that the power goes out all the time. Like a little wind will blow or we'll have a thunderstorm and the power can go out for 2 or 3 days. If something major happens, like a snowstorm, which it did in January of 2022, we lost power for over a week. Now, we did have other ways we have prepared for power losses in the past. We've had a backup generator. We have a hand pump on our well. I have a lot of tools and ways to do things in and around the house that don't require electricity. But that snowstorm in January of 2022 knocked out the power, and then the generator that we had then broke, died. So we were using the hand pump on the well to get water, and then the hand pump broke the next day. And that was so frustrating. Thankfully, there was a lot of snow. So we did a lot of snow collection to have all of our water to melt on the wood stove for washing dishes and keeping clean. But that really just drove my husband to the point of, I'm sick of this. And the first thing he did was buy a new generator. So by the 7th day, we did have power. But after that, he was more serious than ever about looking into solar. We were just interested in the beginning in having something small just for like recharging batteries or emergency situations, because probably 6 or 7 years ago we had looked into solar and it didn't seem feasible for what we wanted it to do back then. And as you know, as technology develops, it does become less expensive. So I would expect in the future for the technology to get easier for common people to use and to become less expensive. But for now, if you are pioneering into the solar field, it can be costly. But we did choose to use cash to pay for all of it. We didn't borrow anything, and my husband did all the work himself. But our primary reason for having solar was for security and independence. And the cost of electricity was secondary. It is nice to know that we will get the money back in 10 to 12 years that we spent on it. But that was not our primary reason for getting solar power. If you're thinking about solar power and your only reason for getting it is financial savings, I don't know if that's the best reason to get it. I guess if you're in a state where there's really expensive electricity, or if there's sketchy electricity, it's not dependable, your property is somewhere where it would cost a lot to run electricity to, or if you're in a state that is starting to require solar power on new construction homes, I don't think solar is a bad idea, but I think if financial savings just on your monthly electric bill is your only priority, it's probably not a good idea, especially if you're paying someone else to do the work for you. It's going to cost even more than we spent to install it. Definitely find lots of trustworthy sources. YouTube is a great source. My husband learned everything he needed to know to install our solar system from YouTube and from a few of the distributors that he bought his products from. He was able to ask them questions and clarify stuff, and he installed it all himself. But take it seriously. It is electricity. It can kill you, okay? Don't play around with it. You can wire it wrong. You have to know what you're doing. But we love it. We are going to keep it for as long as possible. We are thankful that we don't know anymore when the power goes out. We know if we hear our neighbor's automatic backup generator running, then we know the power's out. Recently, he told us a week or two later, we were talking about the helicopters that were coming through to trim the trees. And he was talking about, it was a good thing the power was out that day, so because he saw them nick the line a few times. And we didn't even know the power was turned off because we had power the whole time because we had solar. I don't know about you guys, but all that talking about near exhausted me. I would much rather sit and listen than talk that much, but I'm glad to be able to share what I learned over the last year having solar power for the home. It took me 2 months. I've had that information for 2 months, but I just couldn't find the time to sit down and make a video about it. Just thinking about all the videos that I put out last year, I just don't know how I did it. The thought of having to record and edit and release one video a week right now exhausts me. But it was fun. I do hope to share more of our garden adventures this year with you. Courage, best wishes in your country living adventures. I hope you make that extra special time to get out into nature. Enjoy the beauty that God created for us. And remember to live joyfully. Here, come. Good boy. Ginger. Good girl. Come on. Good girl. I'm going to be going over. I don't like the sun. Sun, go away. 30 days past September, April, June, and November.